EA is now on Twitch. Join us Wednesday nights when Alistair reads a bedtime story, and Sunday mornings for a few hours of chill casual gaming, plus interviews, special guests, pickup streams, and more. Visit twitch.tv/EA Podcasts and follow us to be notified when we go live, plus access VODs of past broadcasts.
Escape Pod, Episode 943. How to Keep Your Cool If You're a Mech First Day on the Job. Part 1 of 2. By Vera Brooke.
Hello everyone, welcome to Escape Pod, the weekly science fiction podcast. This is episode 943. I'm Alistair, your host. The inimitable Adam is on audio duties, and it is so good to be back. This week's story comes to us from Vera Brooke. Vera is a neuroscientist turned speculative fiction writer. Her short fiction has appeared, among other places, in Analog, Cast of Wonders, Factor 4 magazine, Utopia Science Fiction, and Hyphen Punk. She is trying very hard to infuse her fiction with hope and optimism, but the world being what it is, dystopia still often wins out. Occasionally, her stories grow into novels. This story was first published in The Coloured Lens, issue 43, spring 2022. It's a two-part story, and will conclude next week. Your narrator this week is Iba Omencas. Iba is an Emmy-nominated writer, director, producer, currently working for KLCS PBS in Los Angeles. A voracious reader who began narrating fiction podcasts nearly a decade ago, she is now one of 3 narrators on Inner Space, Outer Thoughts, Caltech NASA JPL's first science fiction anthology. In her free time, she's learning to make neon signs and getting way too into hockey. So, suit up, get ready, we've got work to do, because it's story time.
How to Keep Your Cool If You're a Mech First Day on the Job, by Vera Brooke. Read by Iba Omencas. Damn, the exoskeleton was hot. 2 minutes strapped into the smart harness with its thick exospine and the oversized carbon fiber limbs that grew from it, and sweat pooled between Jenna's shoulder blades over her own spinal column. The whole thing hummed with electronics and throbbed with support motors. Nothing like the black top, miniskirt, and sneakers she'd worn on her previous job, waiting tables and tending bar at Lazy Dog's. But the pay was 3 times what she made in tips, and she had the evenings to herself. She was moving up in the world. Jenna raised her thick new arms in front of her, closed and opened her fists, rotated her wrist, wiggled her fingers. Her robotic hands enlarged her motions, each finger lined with a flexible pad for a non-slip grip. The clear visor of her hard hat displayed the specs. Lifting capacity, 400 pounds. Holy shit, she was strong. If Paps were still around, he'd be both horrified and impressed. He'd worked the docks all his life, loading and unloading endless trucks of e-commerce goods and wrecking his back in the process, before exosuits became cost-effective. All to give her a roof over her head and some measure of security in a time where robotics and AI were turning the job market upside down. He wanted her to have a nice, clean office job and wear a suit to work. Well, she was wearing a suit all right. Just not the kind Paps imagined. Anyway, she wasn't cut out for office work. Couldn't imagine anything duller than sitting at a desk in a cubicle no bigger than a porta-john and staring at a computer all day. "What the hell are you doing?" A grim-faced man stepped in front of Jenna. Piercing blue eyes under black hair peppered with gray. No exosuit, but judging by the way his muscles bulged and roped under his long-sleeve tee, he'd worked construction for a while. He held a tablet in his hand. "You don't move until I tell you to move. I'm still linking you up. Got it?" She'd forgotten her mech trainer. His name was Darren, and he'd looked pissed from the moment she'd walked into the hangar this morning, after onboarding in the office trailer. An entirely computerized process that consisted of a rudimentary quiz on safety rules, followed by 24 electronic forms, half of them the company's liability waivers. He barely spoke to her as he helped her suit up and run systems diagnostics. And now he jabbed at his tablet, a permanent scowl etched into his face, like her very presence was a lousy joke. "What's your problem?" Jenna snapped. That got Darren's attention. He looked up at her, gaze sharp enough to slice metal. "My problem? Right now, you're my problem. I have 5 houses to print this week, a rig that can handle 2, and I'm a man short. I need a real mech with experience on the job. Remind me, sweetheart, how much experience have you got?" Jenna bristled. Sweetheart? Was this guy for real or messing with her? So she was new. Fine. But her tech certificate required 60 hours of VR practice, she'd clocked in 94, and aced all of her tests, on top of a hectic schedule at Lazy Dogs. She busted her ass to get here. A little appreciation would be nice. "My name is Jenna," she corrected. "And if we're as busy as you say, why are we wasting time standing around here talking? Give me a job to do. I'm a fast learner, sweetheart." Darren's eyes widened and his lips twitched, his face a fraction less menacing for a second. But then the scowl was back in place. "Okay, Jenna, I see you're eager to get out there. Super. But I still need to know one thing. Your #1 job qualification, and not something I can look up in your file." "Yeah? What's that?" The mech stared her in the eye. "Are you going to lose your shit when something goes wrong? Yes or no? Because my crew are out there, and I don't want anyone hurt on my watch." He pointed his thumb at the open gate of the hangar and a dusty office trailer baking in the sun. "So if you can't handle the heat, do us both a favor and quit right now." Jenna clenched her teeth and glared. What a dick. Was that supposed to scare her? He wouldn't be the first to try. "Sorry, I'm not much of a quitter," she snapped. "Is that right? I guess we'll find out." Darren rotated his arm, the tablet unused for the moment, and jabbed a quick pattern on the touchscreen strapped to his forearm. "And speaking of safety, see that faint lock icon in the upper right corner? It's a motion override. You try anything stupid, and I'll freeze your ass." Jenna glanced at the icon, indignant. She knew about the safety feature. It was for emergencies only. She was about to tell her trainer to go ahead and try it, see what happened, when a loud metal bang shattered her thought. Another mech, a woman in a full suit, had just brought her massive carbon fiber fist in contact with the gate. Her hard hat was in her other hand. Tattoos swirled up her shaved head, and sweat glistened on her throat. "Darren, you comin'? We need you to QC." Her eyes moved to Jenna. "Who the hell is this?" "Hi, I'm Jenna," Jenna said quickly. "I'm new." "No shit," the woman answered, then banged her fist on the gate again. "Come on, boss. Chop chop. It's getting hot out there." And she was gone. Darren tossed away his tablet and suited up in record time, cursing fiercely as he did, although his annoyance seemed no longer aimed at Jenna. Then he spun around and marched towards the gate without another glance in her direction, his movements swift and limber despite the added bulk of his exosuit. Jenna stared at the obsidian vertebrae of his exospine, irked at being ignored, and then hurried after him, her own gait clumsy and lumbering. Her trainer didn't ignore her completely, though, because his carbon fiber arm shot out, halting her progress a second before she plowed through a utility cart loaded with equipment. "Watch it," he barked, frowning at her through his visor. "Okay, sorry." Her cheeks warmed. In her previous job, she could slip through a crowd with a tray full of drinks balanced above her head and never spill a drop. But she didn't even notice the cart. Darren shook his head, then stepped out of the hangar and onto the main road. Jenna followed, her visor darkening against the harsh brightness of the late morning sun. Gravel crunched and popped under her carbon fiber boots as she walked. At first glance, the construction site made Jenna think of a giant sandbox. The desert at the edge of the city stripped of all brush and flattened, with only an occasional saguaro or desert willow still left standing, and a tangled band of prickly pears marking the perimeter. A row of gray rectangles rose out of the ground like sand molds pressed down by a child's hand. A faint ring of pink and blue mountains wavered with heat in the distance. Cute, Jenna thought. Like one of those battered second-hand picture books Paps used to read to her when she was a kid. But as soon as she turned her head, the 3D printing machinery ruined the illusion. A massive, moving steel frame squatted over one rectangle, which marked the foundation of the house. One tall vertical pillar in each corner, each pair connected by 2 parallel horizontal bars, with another perpendicular bar rapidly sliding along them. Mounted on the fast-moving bar was a bulging printhead, pointing downwards and ending in a nozzle that glowed hot. The nozzle spit out a continuous line of goo on top of the short, curved wall already standing, layer by layer drawing the new house into existence. Even with their exosuits on, the machine towered over the human crew. Definitely not a toy. Plus, it stank like spoilt eggs. Jenna's nerves prickled. What had she gotten herself into? But she'd never been in the habit of letting fear or self-doubt dictate her options, and she wasn't going to start now. "Boss, over here." The woman with the shaved and tattooed head, now covered by a hard hat, waved Darren over. She and another crew member, a heavy-set guy wearing a bright orange tee and a hard hat, no exosuit, were bending over a bulky computer resting in an open hard case on a tall storage box. Something's not right. Darren groaned and hurried over, but Jenna stopped, her eyes drawn to the fast-moving printhead that was just rounding the curved front corner of the house, adding another layer of the reddish goo. The house had no sharp corners, inside or outside. Here and there, short tubes were snugly sealed into the walls, for the HVAC, plumbing, and electrical systems to be installed later. As Jenna watched, mesmerized by the printing process, the nozzle reached a break in a straight stretch of the wall and smoothly reversed directions. A window, she guessed. The wall already rose up to her waist. Up close, the goo looked like stacked rolls of red clay that matched the color of the ground she stood on. She'd expected concrete, but clay made more sense. A local, natural material would be cheaper and more sustainable. Good. The city badly needed more affordable housing. It wasn't physical labor that had killed Paps. Stress had done it. The ever-increasing rent and threat of eviction gnawing at his heart muscle and chewing through his arteries month after month and year after year as he hustled to squeeze more mileage out of the same meager paycheck. Until one morning, his heart gave out. If they could have bought a cheap 3D printed house like the one she was looking at, Paps would have still been alive. The old anger flared in Jenna's gut, but she pushed it down. Paps was gone. Nothing she could do for him now, except to build some houses for families who badly needed them. Paps would have liked that. She stepped around the corner pillar, still watching the nozzle, and came face to face with another mech in a full suit. The mech stood inside the house, in the open space that looked like a living room, their own gaze fixed on the nozzle and a handheld device in their robotic fingers aimed at the line of clay that flowed from it. Monitoring the temperature and moisture content of the layer, maybe? Both mattered for the print quality and the length of the curing process, Jenna recalled. The mech, at least a head taller, blinked at Jenna over the half-wall. A magenta mouth framed by a neatly trimmed goatee twitched. "So you're the newbie, huh? Ever printed anything before?" "Only veggie burgers, and they were god-awful," Jenna answered truthfully. "Shit," the mech said. "Excuse me?" But the mech wasn't talking to her. "Kill it!" they yelled over Jenna's head. "Urich, kill it now!" It was too late, though. The nozzle choked, coughed and spluttered, and the neat line of reddish clay thinned and then broke up into a handful of dark, chunky turds, just as a new, more foul stink, rotting fish and burned rubber this time, hit Jenna's nostrils. Urich must have heard the alarm, because the massive printer froze a moment later. No, no, no. Magenta Mouth peered at the turds in horror, craning their neck to see around the printhead that blocked their way. They'll stick if they're dry. Jenna hesitated, not wanting to do any damage to the uncured wall, but the mech's urgency was infectious. "I've got it." With 3 quick steps forward, she shaped her hands into claws, the thumb against the other 4 fingers, and started picking off the turds from the wall and tossing them behind her. To her relief, the robotic extensions of her fingers were less clumsy than she'd expected, although definitely not designed for the delicate task. She ended up accidentally smushing half of the soft, barely crusting clumps, and getting clay all over her robo-gloves. The last turd hit Darren's exosuit in the chest, promptly melting against the carbon fiber shell warmed by the sun. He glanced down at the clay on his suit, then glared at her. "Didn't I tell you not to touch anything?" "No, I don't think you did, actually." "Well, I'm telling you now." His voice was hard, irritation grating like rusted gears. "Don't touch a thing unless I tell you to. You haven't been trained, and we don't have time to redo any walls because you can't keep your hands to yourself." Jenna sucked in her breath. She had just saved his stupid wall by picking off the turds, and she did a good job, too, barely disturbing the still pliable roll of the previous layer. Thanks to her, they didn't have to redo anything. Just add a new layer as soon as whatever was wrong with the printhead was fixed. Not that she expected a show of gratitude. A simple thank you would be enough. Instead, it felt like Darren was going out of his way to piss her off. But why would he try to get rid of her? She was a fast learner. She hadn't lied about that. And if there was one thing Paps taught her, it was that anything worth doing is worth doing well. She wasn't afraid of hard work. She just needed a chance to prove it. Okay, so how about... Jenna started. But Darren turned his back on her and addressed Magenta Mouth. Irlin, what do you think? Irlin shook their head. They were ignoring Jenna, too. It was a sudden spike, so not the clay mix. The heat break or the cooling fan would be my guess. Darren nodded. Urk thinks it's the fan, too. He frowned at the printhead, suspended from the steel bar. I hope so. The fan would be an easy fix. We have a replacement. Sky went to fetch Khalil. He turned and called out, Urk, can you move the printhead to the origin and shut down the system? We're going to get her down and take a look. A musical, 3-tone whistle rent the hot air. An acknowledgement and a warning. Where was the origin? Which corner of the frame? Jenna tensed, ready to duck if the printhead moved towards her. But Darren threw her a grim glance, and she stayed where she was, strangely reassured. He may want her gone, but he wouldn't let her get hurt. She wasn't sure how she knew this, but she trusted her gut feeling. The machinery sprang into motion again, the printhead lifting straight up, as if to avoid invisible obstacles, then retreating to the end of the horizontal bar, as the bar itself traveled along the parallel support bars to the opposite corner of the frame. There, the printhead descended to an easy reach and stopped. The printer sighed, a deep, eerily human sound, like a worn-out worker catching a break, rather than motors and fans powering off, and went still. Darren and Irlin hurried towards the printhead, and Jenna followed. 2 more mechs in full suits joined them, a trail of dust marking their path from the hangar. The woman with the shaved, tattooed head, Sky, carried a cardboard container, slicing it open with her robotic fingers as she walked. The short, dark-skinned guy, Khalil, lugged a huge red toolbox. He set the toolbox down, then deactivated his exosuit and stepped out of it before throwing the box open and grabbing a bunch of tools. Urk was the last to arrive, at a heavy jog and huffing from exertion, the computer case clutched under his arm. What followed made Jenna think of an emergency field surgery, except the patient was a machine. A work table was wheeled closer and locked in place. The printhead dismounted from the support bar and disassembled. The component parts examined for damage. Clay, instead of blood, crusted the nozzle and clogged the internal tubing, although the odor was just as potent. When Khalil was done, they all leaned over and disassembled the printhead. Jenna's VR training hadn't covered repairs, so she only had a vague idea of what she was looking at, but the somber mood told her plenty. Damn it, it's not the fan, Darren said. We don't have an extra heat break, do we? Sorry, boss, not this type, Khalil said. We could try a substitute, Irlin offered. I have an old spare we can modify, Sky said. It wouldn't be a perfect fit, but it'll do the job. But Darren shook his head. Too risky. We need the real thing. Urk was furiously typing on the computer. An express drone can be here in an hour, but it'll put us over budget. He hesitated, sweat glistening above his upper lip and on his neck. I could put in a priority request to... Darren waved his robo-hand dismissively. Don't bother. It'll take them a week and a shitload of emails, and they'll still reject it. He clenched his jaw. Deduct it from my pay. We're going to finish this house by sundown. You got it, boss, Sky said. But we'll all pitch in, yeah? Nods all around. They didn't look happy about it, but nobody hesitated either. Khalil grinned, breaking the tension. Maybe we'll get a bonus this time. It's not impossible. Sky chortled. A bonus? I'm not selling myself cheap. I want a proper raise, damn it. Hell yeah. A raise in a company hovercar. Irlin pursed their magenta lips. I'm sick of taking the train. I swear, it always smells like someone took a piss in it. By now, they were all chuckling, except their boss, who still looked grim and preoccupied as he turned to Urk. You put in the order? Sure did. 48 minutes to delivery. Darren heaved a sigh. Okay. Thanks, Urk. Jenna moved a step closer, the motors of her exosuit whirling, and cleared her throat to get their attention. I want to pitch in too, she said. The majority reaction was widened eyes and raised eyebrows. Only Darren's eyes narrowed behind his visor. That's a generous offer, he said, voice cold as ice. But I have a better idea. Do you know that if you quit right now, before lunch, the company still has to pay you for the whole day? It's the law. You should take advantage of it. Heat rushed to Jenna's face, above and beyond that produced by the hot desert sun. She didn't care if Darren was her boss. She'd trained plenty of waitstaff and a few bartenders too. And this was bullshit. Wow, you know what? If this is how you train new crew, I'm not surprised you're short-handed and behind schedule. Someone clicked their tongue, a small tribute to her boldness. But Darren was not amused. If it was up to me, you wouldn't even touch that exosuit for the first week. Not until you learned what we do here and how to handle yourself so no one gets injured. Jenna stared in confusion. That was why Darren was upset? Because she wore her exosuit? That doesn't make sense, she blurted out. The exosuit makes me safer. Wrong, her boss growled. And the fact that you believe it tells me you're not ready to wear it. Speaking of lunch, Khalil interjected. But for once, Darren's attention was fully on Jenna. Then why do I have it? Jenna challenged, but with less certainty. Why are you wearing one? The suit lets you work harder, lift more, finish the job faster. But it doesn't automatically make you safer. You got that? From behind his visor, Darren's eyes drilled into Jenna. Not until you get used to it and learn how to use it. And not in some nice, clean simulation. But out here, on the job site, where it's hot and dusty, and one mistake can cost you an arm or a leg. Jenna held his gaze. Then teach me instead of telling me to quit, she said hotly. I want to learn, and I'm not going anywhere. Darren studied her. You want to learn? You're sure? Yes! Impatience grated on Jenna's nerves. How many times did she have to say this? Boss, Sky piped in. We should break for lunch before the drone gets here. Darren nodded at his second-in-command. Great idea. Then turned back to Jenna. Okay, your first lesson starts in 5, and the topic is self-control. Self-control? Jenna bristled. Can you be more specific? She was hoping for something more technical, unless her boss was just pulling her leg. But Darren had already turned away and was marching towards the hangar, his carbon fiber reinforced boots crunching the gravel and stirring a clod of reddish dust. The rest of the crew followed. Not freaking out, Sky said to no one in particular as she passed Jenna. Grace under pressure, Ireland added. Khalil was just strapping into his exosuit. Hydraulic pressure. Urich snorted, then threw Jenna an apologetic glance and hurried after the others, jogging to keep up with their mechanically lengthened strides, his computer under his arm. Jenna glared at the 3 carbon fiber spines and the orange t-shirt. Her new boss and crewmates were really pushing her buttons. Whatever. The best strategy was to ignore their jabs. Inside the hangar, clearly visible through its open front gate, Sky, Ireland, and Khalil were already out of their exosuits, the hard hats gone. They crowded near the small fridge, then carried their lunch containers and water bottles to a beat-up table with a bench on each side. Urich hit the fridge and hurried to join them. One by one, the crew snuck out the back door, no doubt to use a porta-john. Jenna's bladder tensed as she neared the hangar. She could use the restroom herself. But first, where was her boss? She had more questions about that lesson. Darren stood off to the side when she entered, his exosuit and hard hat gone. He glanced at her, then hit a switch on the wall. A large fan opposite the table shuddered to life, the head slowly rotating side to side. Jenna stopped when the breeze brushed her. The breeze was warm, but it still felt wonderful after the blazing, oppressive heat outside, and so did the shade. She closed her eyes and held still. Okay, a voice said. Jenna's eyes flew open, just in time to see her boss lowering his hand, the touchscreen on the inside of his forearm still lit up. Was he speaking to her? But Darren was already walking to the fridge. He grabbed his lunch, then crossed to the table where the crew were busy shoveling food in their mouths and washing it down with water. Urich, can you keep an eye on the delivery updates? Sure. Urich pulled his computer case closer, cracked it open, and started typing with one hand while holding a sandwich in the other. Jenna watched the group grudgingly. Weren't they going to invite her to join? She was hungry too, she needed to pee and she was going to need help taking off her exosuit for the first time. Worse, she was pretty sure they knew that, and they were ignoring her on purpose. Fine. If they wanted to act like jerks, let them. Jenna didn't care. She would take off her suit by herself and eat her lunch outside alone. She'd rather bake in the heat than put up with this unfriendly bunch. No rules said she had to socialize on her break. The exosuits stood in a neat row along the wall, each next to its charging station. Jenna's spot was at the end. She better park her suit there, not to give Darren an excuse to complain. She started to lift her foot. Nothing. Her boot wouldn't budge. She tried again, straining harder. Ouch. Her knee popped, but didn't bend, the boot as good as nailed to the ground. Annoyed, she looked down, leaning forward, and was brought up short. She couldn't bend either. She couldn't move at all, her exosuit like a rigid cage around her limbs, torso, and the back of her neck. Her muscles were no match for the carbon fiber frame that encased them. Embarrassment whipped through her. Did she touch her control panel by accident? Or was it a malfunction of some sort? Wouldn't the suit's diagnostics warn her, though? Nothing was flashing in her display. Wait, the lock icon was on. The motion override. Damn it. She should have known. Darren had threatened to freeze her ass, and now he did, for no reason whatsoever. That's what he had tapped on the touchscreen on his arm when she had paused to enjoy the breeze stirred by the fan. He tricked her.
I'm trying something different with this one, because it's a two-parter. This week I want to talk about the world, and how this sort of story feels, to me, more and more like a major form of genre fiction writing itself into existence. It's near future, but so near future as to be functionally contemporary. It has cyberpunk trappings, but only in the sense our own lives have them. It's not dystopian, but it needs to pay rent. It feels grounded, like there's dirt under its fingernails and its jeans have been patched a couple of times. It's the sort of story that genuinely good country music is and bad country music dresses like. I love this sort of stuff because it reminds me of a maxim I use over at Pseudopod a lot. That horror is a fundamentally hopeful genre, and extending that out, speculative fiction in general is hopeful down to its bones. In horror's case, I view it as an almost therapeutic experience, vicarious trauma that holds our hand as we go over the edge, helps us hit the water right, helps us kick for the surface. Speculative fiction as a whole is a little different and rather blunter. In order for us to write about speculative possibilities and futures, we have to assume there will be one. Survival is baked in, even if salvation has to be earned. The world never quite ends, and as long as it doesn't quite end, neither does the story. And as long as the story is being told, someone has to be alive to tell it, and have, if nothing else, the hope of being heard. Brooke's piece gets deeper into this with the way it uses 3D printing on an industrial scale, and who's actually doing the printing. And by the way, the answer is us. Now. We'll throw a couple of examples in the show notes, but the short version is this isn't just possible, it is being done. Most of the examples I found were either test communities or exemplar houses put together by design consultancies or architecture firms, but the truth is inescapable. The future is literally 3D printing itself into existence, and Brooke is one of the people with the plan. I love that. I also love how Brooke takes great pains to show the technology as just that. Technology. This isn't an instant fix, it's not a singularity, it's a job that's exponentially faster than it's ever been before, but now is just differently difficult. The future is here, and as I said, it's got dirt under its fingernails, deadlines to hit, and a boss to keep happy. How it does that? Well, we'll talk about that next time. As is always the case, we rely on you to pay our authors, our narrators, and our crew, and to cover our costs. We are entirely donation funded, and last year that changed in some very exciting ways, with EA becoming a registered US non-profit. I'm speaking in 2024, by the way, last year being 2023. We ran a great end-of-year campaign in 2023 to raise awareness about all the new ways you can help us out. Like, for example, if you're a US taxpayer, you might be able to claim a deduction now. Please, if you can, check out the short Metacast on escapeartists.net for more ideas, and do please get in touch if you think of something else that's more meaningful to you that we don't presently do. One-time donations are fantastic and gratefully received, but what really makes a difference is subscribing. Subscriptions get us stability and a reliable income we use to bring free and accessible audio fiction to the world. You can subscribe for a monthly or annual donation through PayPal or Patreon. Not only do you help us out immensely when you subscribe or donate, but you also get access to a bunch of bonus audio. You help us, we help you. Everything becomes just a little easier. Even if you can't donate financially, please consider donating a little time and spreading the word about us. If you liked an episode, then please consider sharing it on social media, or blogging about us, or leaving a review. It really does all help. And we could always use the help, so thank you, once again. We're back next week with the same team and the second half of this story. Then, as now, it will be a production of the Escape Artists Foundation and distributed under the Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. And we leave you this week with the quote you may have been expecting from Aliens. Well, I can drive that loader. Have a Class 2 rating. We'll see you next week, folks. Until then, have fun.